low energy, trouble concentrating, chronic fatigue. If you feel like something is holding you back from peak performance, you're probably right.
And there's not a single athlete out there. There's not a single active person out there, whether you're just, swinging a sledgehammer all day or you're climbing mountains or running trails, without also breaking down muscle.
Kevin Guillen has tested performance nutrition where there's zero margin for error. Backcountry hunts, extreme altitudes, and more. Today, he's talking with us about why working athletes require the same nutritional edge as elite athletes, and the difference between what works to fuel your body and what doesn't.
When you're fatigued, you're struggling to feel like you're performing at the level you want, it starts further back than that day of work.
This is the WorkReady Podcast. I want to start very practically, and I think a lot of people listening will recognize this situation immediately. So someone puts in a full shift, eats throughout the day, does everything that they think they're supposed to do, and still hits a wall at hour 8. What's happening in the body when effort and fuel are not translating into sustained energy?
What's happening in the body is generally a translation of the decisions you've made, going back to the night before. And I think a lot of listeners are going to probably hear me say this stuff, and it's going to sound like that old just rubric curriculum stuff where it's like, yeah, sleep, drink water, put good food in your body. But the reality is those core principles are just really fundamental and pillars in how, you translate what goes in your body to usable, clean, productive energy throughout your day. And I think everyone's probably pretty familiar with the types of foods that we're surrounded by in society today, whether it's at Starbucks, the gas station, what have you. There's plenty of carbs. There's plenty of sugar everywhere, and that's the trap. That's kind of the thing that I prioritize the most and that I see making the biggest difference in people's work life and their health, just generally their health, is not getting on that insulin roller coaster, that sugar roller coaster first thing in the morning, because it's tough to get off of it once you're on it. Once you're putting a lot of sugar into your system or those fast absorbing carbs first thing in the morning, it's really, really tough to kind of rebalance and start regulating a lot of those levels, those blood sugar levels that are indicating or dictating a lot of your energy output, not just physically, but mentally as well. So, I think a lot of people tend to get really narrowly focused, and I do this as well sometimes. I'm not speaking from like a, I know it all. This is like a everyday thing that I've got to think about and, fail at and get better at. But you think about, God, I feel like crap. What did I just eat? So much of it starts way further back than that. How did you sleep the night before? What did you eat for dinner the night before? What kind of conversations did you have with your family the night before? How much stress were you going to bed with? What kind of mental space were you in the night before? What's the mental load on your body and toll on your body that you're carrying around all the time? And a lot of the times that's the thing that really drives your decision making of what kind of food you're putting in your body, how much energy or intention you put behind how you're fueling yourself. It starts further back than just the food decisions, like just what you're putting in your mouth that day of work. It tends to happen before that.
One of the other guests that we have had on the WorkReady Podcast is Coach P, Mark Paulson, one of the co-founders of Wilderness Athlete. But can you share, for those who haven't listened to that episode, a little bit more about Wilderness Athlete in the background?
The genesis of Wilderness Athlete was really just the translation of Mark Paulson. He was a avid athlete his whole life. He spent his career in strength and conditioning, coaching athletes at a very high level, collegiate, Olympic, professional. He played pro football for a while himself. So that was the world he lived in. He was also a pretty passionate hunter. And those two things, I think, there was kind of a gap there at the time, at least in the nutrition industry. All the higher level, next level performance nutrition resources were for people that were playing between the lines, playing 4 quarters, 2 halves, that kind of thing. And in this situation, when I'm in, the backcountry, when I'm 10 miles in or putting my body through some elements at altitude, heat, there's no whistle, right? Like there's no halftime. And that's where it started. He brought together a lot of the relationships he had in the formulation side of things, the sports nutrition side of things, human physiology research that was going on, to bring about like the best available science, the most current science that was out there. But that's how it started, and that's what we're still doing today.
And explain a little bit more about that unique blend that Coach P and your formulators put in place that really maximizes not only the hydration uh, capabilities of the product, but also just the performance aspect.
Sure. Well, so at the time when Hydrate and Recover was formulated, the really hydration science hadn't changed in many years. Gatorade, Powerade were the big names in that space, and that was what everybody kind of viewed and leaned on as the end all be all of electrolytes. But what you were getting was far too much sugar than the body needs, and actually it's detrimental in terms of how the body is able to actually process all that sugar and what it does with it. And then really a poor electrolyte complex. Gatorade mostly just gives you a lot of sodium, which is a key electrolyte, right? Like it's an important electrolyte, but it's not the only one. We also saw that there was a much larger opportunity there to include a whole host of other ingredients that can elevate your health and your performance in a number of other ways, not just addressing electrolyte needs and maybe blood sugar levels and glycogen restoration. So we add 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C. Vitamin C has a whole host of different benefits, from immune system function to helping draw fluid into your tissues. So on a physical level, we use adaptogenic herbs. Adaptogenic herbs they're kind of tough to describe, but essentially what they do is they really help your body mitigate a lot of stress and environmental stress and adapt to stressful environments, stressful scenarios. And in our world, and for like a working athlete or even a wilderness athlete, a lot of times there's a lot of stress involved in being in hot climates, or let's say high altitude. If you're on a hunt and you're 6, 7, 8,000, 10,000 feet of elevation and your body's not totally used to that, it's under a lot of stress. We use some ionic trace minerals, which is great for a lot of different things, from just micro level body functions. So we basically didn't want to stop at just, let's give you some electrolytes, let's give you the right amount of sugar, and send you on your way. We took the opportunity to really give you a very well-rounded, very healthy formula.
And the thing I personally love about Hydrate and Recover, I'm a trail runner, and so I'm running at higher
Yeah.
elevations for hours, sometimes on end. And I think the branched chain amino acids, like that's something that's not very common in electrolyte drinks. Can you maybe explain that formulation as part of the Hydrate and Recover? Because to me, that feels like it's kind of the big differentiator.
Yeah. So, and I'll give you a little bit of history on this, and just from a formulation standpoint, we didn't always add branched chain amino acids. The recovery side of our name, we used to use glucosamine. Glucosamine, largely supplementally, like when you're adding glucosamine, comes from shellfish, and we knew we could improve the formula by replacing glucosamine with branched chain amino acids. So we swapped those two ingredients, and it did improve the formula quite a bit. Branched chain amino acids are far more healthy and helpful to the body in a short window of time to inspire some actual muscle repair and tissue repair. And there's not a single athlete out there, there's not a single active person out there, whether you're just swinging a sledgehammer all day or you're climbing mountains or running trails, that is draining your fluids and your electrolytes without also breaking down muscle and also stressing muscle. So, part of the key to any activity is your ability to recover. You're only as good as you can recover. So by giving yourself some branched chain amino acids, those are critical components to actually the building blocks of the proteins and protein synthesis necessary to rebuild that tissue and that muscle that's damaged over whatever workout, work day you're facing.
One of the things I've been doing lately is I'll add 10 grams of creatine to my Hydrate and Recover when I go out for a long run. Definitely some research that shows that creatine can help from just providing the muscles with extra energy, helps with recovery. But can you maybe
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about creatine? That's another product that you formulate,
Yeah.
and maybe the benefits of that and the applications for backcountry and working athletes.
Yeah. We're big believers in creatine. We've actually been using creatine in a shake of ours for many years. But we've actually introduced it into another couple products of ours. We actually recently came out with a standalone creatine with the addition of HMB, which stands for hydroxymethylbutyrate. So it's a combination of the two. The science and there's a lot of more emerging research coming out into creatine, as a lot of your listeners and yourself probably know. Like, creatine is just like the craze right now. Everyone's really, really interested in it. Whereas before, it used to be very widely appreciated by bodybuilders, competitive athletes, for its anabolic properties, for its performance enhancing properties, which it certainly does. So creatine at a cellular level is very, very helpful for the body's production of ATP, which really is your muscle's usable form of energy. We get creatine from a lot of natural resources. We get it a lot from red meat, some shellfish, but it tends to be that our just dietary consumption of it isn't enough. One of the biggest benefits of creatine, as we see it, is the ability to hydrate your cells. And I think the double-edged sword, and what a lot of people, why creatine used to get such a bad rap, is because people would think, oh, I'm just going to drink creatine. It puts on some muscle and some bulk, but it's just water weight. I've heard that a ton. I think even at one time I was guilty of thinking that myself. It was like it was somehow wasn't real or genuine muscle because it was just water weight. While it is true with, when you're consuming creatine, you tend to, you'll put on a little bit of weight. Your body tends to hang on to more water. What's also true is that a hydrated cell is a much better functioning cell. There's cells all over your body that have a whole host of different roles and responsibilities, from contracting muscle, from just the function of muscle, repairing muscle. There's a lot of different functions. And when your cells are hydrated and they have the type of nutrients necessary to carry out their role, they're going to do so a lot better. That's part of the reason why you see with, a fairly short period of time of consuming creatine, you see strength levels go up, you see recovery time reduced. You see muscle definition increase, your fat to muscle ratio is improved. So we're big believers in it because there's really not a whole lot of drawbacks. There's a small section of people out there, that will have some GI response to it, negative GI response to it. And that's up to everybody to kind of determine on their own what the right level is. There's a lot of research that suggests that you only really need to consume about 3 to 3.5 grams of creatine a day to get a benefit from it. Now, there's also some research showing that there's a lot of cognitive benefits when you're consuming 7 to 10 grams a day. The muscular skeletal system is going to consume and can store and can process and utilize about 5 grams a day, but that's not including your just the cognitive side of your body as well. So there's a lot of people that are really interested in it from a memory standpoint, a mental energy standpoint, a focus, and just a cognitive performance side of it. And the research is showing that in order to kind of tap into some of those benefits, you probably need to be consuming a little bit more, because in order for there to be enough left over for your brain to use it as fuel, you need to be probably north of 5 grams. These are kind of broad stroke numbers. These are just sort of the numbers that I think a lot of the research is showing, but everybody, what we always encourage people to do is to really kind of pay attention to their own response, their own needs. Everyone's a bit different. And so it's sometimes dangerous to just take a total prescriptive approach and say like, oh, well, this is what, generally that's what works for most people, but you may be a little different. So, start small, start maybe about 3.5 grams. If you tolerate that, just fine. Get up to 5 grams. If you're good there, just, see where you land.
Yeah, it's funny you say that there's a creatine craze right now, which I would agree. Everybody's talking about it, but this has been something that's been around for 40 plus years.
Yeah.
It's actually the most well-researched supplement out there. There are over 10,000 peer-reviewed articles just on creatine's efficacy. And if you haven't listened to the episode with Dr. Rick Kreider, which was a couple episodes before this, he goes into great detail on the research benefits and, like you said, the cognitive impact. And one of the recent studies that I think is so intriguing is the fact that if you do a large dose, which is like 30 grams, which that's a lot of creatine, but if you're sleep deprived, you can actually offset the impact of sleep deprivation by that loading dose. And,
Yeah.
it's not something that you would want to do long term to try to outrun sleep deprivation. I mean, the
Mhm.
body ultimately is going to keep score there, but it definitely is a great tool that can be used to maintain that cognitive function in those type of situations. And again, it's just giving the brain extra energy
Yeah.
to be able to perform. And I think the takeaway here is, you're a lineman, you're working a storm, you're a construction worker that you're traveling, you're going through multiple time zones. Uh, Taking creatine with you, it's so portable. I mean, you just throw it into a Ziploc bag. You can get
Yeah.
single packets. It's super portable, but it's a great
Yeah.
thing. I literally don't travel anywhere without a little bit of creatine as part of my supplementation routine. With Vimosity, utility leaders are cutting injuries by up to 50%, keeping crews safer, empowering stronger operational readiness. Teams stay engaged. Your safety impact scales across every work group, and you gain the insights to prevent serious injuries before they happen. Vimosity delivers expert content, seamless deployment tools, and real-time risk data in one workforce readiness platform. Learn more at vimosity.com. So, Kevin, my first exposure to Wilderness Athlete was actually at the International Line Rodeo. There
Mhm.
was a booth there, Working Athlete, which is a sister company to Wilderness Athlete. Can you explain a little bit more about how you started working with frontline workers and really serving that population?
Yeah, actually, it started with linemen. So one of our good friends that is a friend of one of our other business partners, he was basically a safety manager for a local utility company here in Phoenix, SRP, and had for many many years been buying different hydration electrolyte replacements for their whole division, this whole department in Phoenix. We could see 120 degrees, sometimes a little bit more than that in the summer. And in the line of work that these guys are in, they don't get an off day just because it's hot. You get a big section of the power grid that goes out, something that needs their work, they've got to go do it. So safety is just a huge, huge um, thing in their life. And for many years, they were, always hovering around, and I'm probably going to butcher these numbers, but I know it was a considerable number of heat related, like recordable incidents every year. Guys going down to the field, guys having heat stroke, heat related illnesses to some degree. So their electrolyte replacements, while they were probably better than nothing, they weren't mitigating the problem enough. Now, a good friend of ours, also an avid hunter, also a big part of our hunting community, and he had been using Hydrate and Recover for years in the field on hunts. And I don't know what made the light bulb click in his head, but said, "Hey, maybe this is something we should try for our workforce." And I think we started with a test run with a few crews, some guys that were in particularly sensitive positions of heat during the summer, and the number of heat related incidents and recordable incidents they had just plummeted immediately and went to zero. And it's still, as far as I know, has still been zero since they've been using Hydrate and Recover. So for us, that was it was, I guess, sort of serendipity in the way it fell on our laps. And once we got into that world, we realized, man, there's a lot to be gained here that can serve these people better, that can take care of these linemen better, that I think can do a lot better at mitigating some heat stress, better for them overall from a sugar standpoint. We only use 5 grams of sugar, and it's an intentional amount of sugar. Like, it has a purpose beyond just making it taste good and sweet. It is actually much more helpful in making those electrolytes reach your blood system and do the certain nerve signaling that electrolytes are supposed to do, but not too much. When you're up 20 plus grams of sugar per serving, it really becomes more of an inflammatory response and kind of blunts your system's adaptation to heat and adaptation to stress. So this is much different than guys that are going hunting for a week. This is life or death. This is their job. This is the way they put food on the table. This is the way that they keep our whole grid and our whole system in the world we live in working. And so in a lot of ways, it hit us as a much heavier, a much more important part of our job than just serving the hobbyists or the guys that make their lifestyles hunting, but their job and the way that they feed their family and keep our world running.
Kevin, let's talk practically about strategy when it comes to fueling. And so when I say fueling, it's hydration and nutrition. What are some of the
Mhm.
most common mistakes you see people make, or maybe you've made personally in the
I'm sure.
backcountry or
Yeah.
out in the frontline workers?
Not enough protein. Generally at all phases of your diet, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. As a whole in our country, we don't consume enough protein. You can find a bagel, a muffin, a donut, or even just a super, super sugary latte chocolatey drink at every, coffee shop you go to. And that has almost become like a staple in our American food system, in our breakfast, routine. But it's very, very dangerous to get into that routine. And I think if you're focused more highly on protein, you're going to do yourself a lot of good from a lot of standpoints. So you're going to feel a much higher degree of satiety. You're just going to feel full longer. You get a lot more energy out of protein than you do. It's a lot more. It digests a lot slower. Things like carbs, sugary things, they're generally faster digesting. They're fast sources, fast jolts of energy. And the steep decline you get from that is what kind of gets you on that roller coaster of, overeating. You get a lot more cravings. Your blood sugar generally crashes. Your mental sharpness generally starts to slip. So for me, one of my biggest focuses is my first meal of the day has got to be pretty rich in protein, whether that's a whole heaping scoop of protein in a shake that I'm going to drink, or if I've got time to make 3-4 eggs, I just want to make sure I'm starting my day off with a good dose of protein. And I try to make sure protein's represented well in every meal I have. Another mistake I think I see a lot of people making is overeating in our culture, especially lunch. We have usually pretty high demanding mornings. A lot of us that are working office jobs or whatever, even if you're working in the field, morning is when you get your day started. You get a lot of work done. You push it. You're getting a lot of your day going. Lunchtime comes around, and because a lot of us have just eaten a lot of sugar, or we've drinking a ton of caffeine early in the morning, we're starting to kind of feel the backside of that. And so, now we've got a break, and everywhere we go for lunch, it's usually heaping portions of something. And usually it's an overconsumption of a lot of different calories, and a lot of it tends to be, again, carb rich, and not really a good presence of fiber, fat, protein in the rest of that meal. And, so you put a whole lot of food in your system at lunch, and then, gosh, the second half of your day is, and I've been there a lot too, when I have a big lunch, you just feel like taking a nap. I heard a saying from a guy a long time ago that's always kind of stuck with me. He tries to see everything he eats, how am I going to turn it into energy? Now, don't get me wrong. Like I love eating sugary sweets. It's probably my biggest Achilles heel. Like I love eating sugary snacks, crappy food sometimes. But if you try to think, especially during the week when your output is important, if you try to think about like, how am I going to turn it into energy? How is that going to help me with my job today? How is that going to help me feel good? It's really actually a good way to rule out a lot of the stuff that you're presented with.
What's your go-to protein snack when you're in the backcountry, or let's say you're on a road trip and you're just going to have access to gas station food?
To be honest, shakes, and especially in the backcountry. So like, and I'll talk about that first. When I'm like on a hunt, a lot of times, jerky or steaks, stuff that's like easily packable, stuff that doesn't take much to make. I love shakes because if you get a good meal replacement shake, like we make a great meal replacement shake that's fairly low in sugar, high in protein, but it's well rounded with good carbs and fats. Like I don't want to make it sound like carbs are completely enemy. They're highly, highly necessary to our function for sure. But in moderation and from complex sources is the right way to consume them. So a meal replacement shake is a great way to conveniently get in a good amount of calories and healthy calories. Jerky is another really good one, just from a protein standpoint. Some jerky has a lot of sugar and salt in it too, but that's not the end of the world as long as you're eating things in moderation. But macadamia nuts are great. They're generally pretty high in fat, good in protein. Also, they're pretty low in omega 9s compared to things like almonds or peanuts. So, say peanuts, for example, they're really high in omega 9s. And when left unchecked, they tend to be pretty inflammatory. So, I feel a little bit less regulated by just eating handful after handful of macadamia nuts, and I love them. I think the focus, especially when you're in situations like on the road or on a short day at work or in the backcountry, is just being intentional and thoughtful and trying to make the best decision you can. Sometimes there's just not the best options. But as long as you're thinking about it and prioritizing it, you're probably going to make a better decision than grabbing a Coke and, eating a Snickers bar.
And hydration is so critical to performance. I mean, we can go a long time without food, but like 3 days without water and you're not going
Yeah.
to make it. And oftentimes when we're working hard, when we're in the backcountry, that thirst reflex may not be like that strong. And when it kicks in, we're already a little bit behind the eight ball. So what is your strategy from a hydration perspective when you know it's going to be a 10, 12-hour day of physical activity?
I try to keep it simple. I don't have like rules in my life where it's like, oh, I got to drink this much water. One I guess kind of not even a rule, but just sort of a habit I've been in is the first thing when I wake up before I even have coffee, I try to drink 8 to 12 ounces of water. I just chug a glass of water, just get water in my system right away. So I'm beginning immediately to dig myself out of that dehydrated state that happens when you're sleeping. Um, for me, getting water in, just simple water, like often is very key. But also making sure I'm mixing in a good level of electrolytes, like with Hydrate and Recover, throughout the day is critical too. And that's a problem that a lot of people have is they think just simple water is enough. Obviously, water is king, of course. But when you're not getting the right electrolytes in that water, the sodium, potassium, magnesium in there, you can get hyponatremic. You lose a lot of the electrolytes in your blood, and it becomes almost just over diluted, where you're lacking the electrolytes in your system to carry out the signaling, nerve signaling that's very critical to keep just some very basic functional operations happening in your body. Cognitively, from a muscle standpoint, that's where that comes. And people are like, oh, I've been drinking a lot of water. When was the last time you had like an electrolyte replacement? How much sodium have you had in your system? Those are key as well. So water often and electrolytes mixed in there as well is just kind of how I operate.
One of the number one beverages that's sold across the U.S. are energy drinks. I guess it's more of a class of beverages, but so high in all these different stimulants, and then you have sugar on top of it, and it can be definitely an addiction. Wilderness Athlete came out with a product to try to give people an alternative to maintain a more balanced level of energy.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about just your thoughts regarding the continued use of high energy, high sugar beverages versus maybe some alternatives?
Sure. Yeah. 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 So canned energy drinks, let's just call them the cult energy drinks because that's really what they are. The things you find at gas stations, convenience stores, um, things that are in cans already ready to go in general. And I'm painting this with broad strokes. I know I might offend some people here who are in the cult and they drink certain ones avidly and they're big fans of, whatever energy drink that is. But a lot of times there's far too much caffeine in it. Um, Upwards of 250 to 300 milligrams of caffeine is even 200. It's just not necessary. And if it is, then the problem really starts with how much caffeine your body's pretty used to getting on a pretty regular level. Your adrenal glands are pretty fatigued, they're pretty shot. And in order to get the kind of stimulus you want, you need that much to keep you going. And so that kind of, it's a whole nother subject, but you mentioned sugar as well. So almost all of these canned energy drinks they have tons of sugar in them. And they have a lot of preservatives typically, they have to be shelf stable in a can for months to years, while they go on trucks and sit on a shelf, what have you. Every one of our products that we make is in a powder and it's intentional. We believe, we have always a little phrase that the power is in the powder. The reason why we make things in powder form is because it is going to keep those ingredients as bioavailable and the integrity of them as high as they can be until you're ready to put that into water and consume it pretty immediately. When you mix something in solution, that ingredient, that vitamin, that amino acid, that caffeine molecule, all those molecules begin to degrade instantly and over time. So by the time you ingest it, the ease in which that your body's able to digest those ingredients just is not nearly as, there's a lot more work needed and just a lot less available there to nutrition to derive out of it for your body. So our energy and focus formula is really just a healthy alternative to energy drinks. We use 125 milligrams of caffeine, which is the equivalent of like a small cup of coffee. It comes from green coffee bean is where we get that caffeine. So it's naturally sourced as opposed to, a lot of synthetic sources, which, the difference really being that a lot of times synthetic sourced caffeine tends to get metabolized just differently, faster. It tends to have just a different experience that your body's going to have versus something that's coming from a natural source. We use some other energy cofactors in our formula as well, which truly for me is the key, I think. So we're not just going to give people a dose of caffeine and say good luck. We're also giving you a lot of ingredients that really help your body produce those energies, fuel those energy producing mechanisms in your body as well. So like vitamin B6, B12, we use adaptogenic herbs as well, and some other antioxidants. Antioxidants are super critical for cellular health when you're a pretty active person. So it's a very healthy energy drink, and it's not just stimulus. I love caffeine. I'm a big believer in caffeine, and caffeine can be good in moderation. It's a very powerful and critical neuroactive agent. But overconsumption, like with anything else, can lead you down a pretty slippery slope. So that's why we stick in that 125 milligram range. And, you can go to any store today and find something that's going to give you 300 milligrams of caffeine and probably a good dose of sugar with it. But that'll leave you feeling pretty fried at the end of your day and sort of depleted. It as well gets you on that roller coaster of needing that amount of caffeine to keep you operational.
Kevin, let's move into some myth busting. These are some things that I've heard over and over again from people, and
Yeah.
I think it's good to just think through these statements and really unpack, what people are trying to say here. So, myth number one is calories are calories. As long as I'm eating enough, I'm fueled. What's wrong with that statement?
Oh, absolutely not true. So calories are not calories. You can have a 500 calorie candy bar versus 500 calories that comes from something like steak, potatoes, and veggies. There are completely different properties and digestive properties and energy results from different calories. Just because you get a unit of energy, like that's what calories are, a unit of energy, doesn't mean that it is going to be the same lasting, performing, functional unit of energy. So like where you're getting those calories is critical.
Myth number two, if I'm not hungry, I don't need to eat. And so what's actually happening when someone suppresses hunger during long shifts, and what does it cost them long term?
Well, what generally is happening a lot of times when your body is getting that signal of like, I'm not really hungry, it tends to be that your cortisol levels are pretty high. You have a lot of, your sympathetic nervous system is pretty taxed. You've got a lot of decision making. You've got a lot of environmental stressors. You've got a lot of things on your plate right now. You're operating heavy equipment. So your adrenaline's pretty high. Your cortisol levels are high. And that tends to suppress your appetite because your body is essentially saying, it's not time to eat, it's time to focus. It's time to get stuff done. It's not time to replenish or nourish. We got to put all our energy into making sure we're focused and prioritizing the task at hand. The downside to that, though, of tolerating that and not eating and not nourishing the body, is before it's too late, you're gonna be in a hole. You're gonna be in a calorie deficit. You're gonna be fatigued mentally, physically, and somewhere down the road, you're gonna overeat. So you're gonna have those late night cravings that aren't gonna be good for you. You're gonna have, and the more costly, even worse yet, you're gonna have you're more prone to mistakes. Your reaction time slows. It just gets you just deviated enough to where you're trying to play catch up, and along that path you could make some pretty costly mistakes. So if you're eating or drinking only based on the result of like, oh, I'm hungry, when you know you're having a super active day, the chances are you're kind of playing catch up and you're going to be a little behind the ball.
I appreciate you saying that too, because I think that proper hydration and nutrition is a safety feature, and it's something we need to be
Yeah.
talking about to keep people's heads in the games, keep them
Hmm.
cognitively sharp so that they can perform at that highest level. And like you said, decreased uh, you know, coordination, decrease muscle output and strength
Yeah.
output when we're undernourished. So thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, myth number 3, energy drinks solve fatigue.
A lot of times these energy drinks that we were just talking about in the long run end up costing you and pulling more energy from you than they are giving to you. The metabolism mechanisms and the digestive mechanisms and the processing of some of these synthetic ingredients, preservative ingredients, and just weird ingredients, frankly, a lot of these energy drinks we're using require a lot of energy to process, to carry around. Um, I think kind of the misconception is that, gosh, I'm sluggish, I'm down, I'm tired. I just need caffeine. I need caffeine and sugar. Well, that's going to maybe get you there in the short term, which frankly sometimes is necessary. If you got to just get it done, you got to get it done. I'm not saying you always have those options. But it's going to cost you something down the road for sure. It'll generally that affects your sleep pretty harshly. Generally that affects the way you eat pretty well. It affects your stress levels. And it affects just the overall health and well-being of your body and your mind in the long run.
What are some early signs that if I'm working on a crew or I'm out in the backcountry with a partner, some early signs that they're struggling maybe from a fatigue standpoint or a hydration standpoint, a nutrition standpoint, or maybe it's myself. What are some of those early signs that I should be aware of?
When you're feeling mentally foggy when you shouldn't, when you feel like caffeine's the only answer to get you up and feel motivated, like when you feel like a lack of motivation, um, when you feel like that the answer to motivation and action is just a stimulant. I think the ideal, like the goal, is good solid sleep, good restorative, productive sleep. It doesn't mean you're gonna have to get 9 hours every night, but you feel like you got good quality sleep. If you had good nutrition in your system that night before and that morning, those are the best ways to set yourself up for success. But I think the telltale sign is people that are on kind of a constant stream of caffeine and sugar in order to feel like they've got to keep themselves in it mentally as well, not just physically but mentally. And that's kind of the another indicator too is, our bodies tend to be a lot stronger than our minds. Our minds will give up on us a lot earlier than our bodies will, in my experience. So a lot of times when we are on this cycle of like, God, I need a little more caffeine, or I'm gonna have a sugary snack just to get a little sugar kick. A lot of it's a cognitive thing, and it's a mental thing where you don't have the right base in your system, whether that's from a sleep or nutritional or hydration standpoint, to really support the right fuel in your mind. But your body's capable of a heck of a lot. So I think that's the disconnect that a lot of people sometimes have, is think that like the nutrition, the hydration and stuff is just for their body, to make sure my body's well taken care of. But it also has a big role to do with cognitively and emotionally and mentally, how present, how motivated, how ready for action you are. So I think paying attention to what people say, their attitude, their mood, that's a big part of it. If they don't feel like they don't seem like they're terribly like motivated to get this thing done, or they don't have a great attitude about it, if they're complaining about it, if they're yawning a lot, cognitively, if they just seem sort of out of the game, it's an indicator that maybe they don't have the right approach. Somewhere there's a broken link in that chain.
What's one habit that people listening today can start to implement that would have the biggest impact?
Ooh, having a big old glass of water before you have coffee. And I say that because that's what I'm focused on currently in my life is I'm a big coffee drinker and I love coffee. I love the ritual of coffee, but I am emphasizing more lately, not immediately grabbing coffee and just starting with like either a full glass of water or drinking a hydrate and recover along with some water afterwards, before I have coffee. Um, as I said before, the fluid needs are pretty high when you're a working person, especially if you're in a hot environment. It's a good way to get the brain spinning. It gets your metabolism fired up on something that it knows what to do with. And generally, a lot of the recommendation is that you're going to get a lot more out of that first cup of coffee if you wait 30 to 60 minutes to have that first cup of coffee versus that immediate, I'm going to wake up and throw that Keurig pod in there and have that first cup of coffee within the first like 3-4 minutes, which I've done a lot in my life too. And sometimes it's just mentally, you're like, I need that. It's my ritual. But that one cup of coffee would hit you way better and you'd feel way better from it if you waited a little bit and if you have water first thing. So that would be, and it's an easy thing to get into, especially if you go to bed with a glass of water in your nightstand like I do. Just wake up, let a bed, chug that whole freaking thing and start there.
Kevin, if you were to recommend one wilderness athlete product that every field worker utilizes, what would it be?
Hydrate and recover, hands down. It is the lifeblood of an active person for sure. Electrolytes are, mystery. They're incredibly critical to how your body and your mind function and stay safe on a daily basis. But what we have in Hydrate and Recover goes a lot further than that. 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C is going to really help your immune system, and not just help your immune system, but it really helps with drawing fluid into your soft tissues as well, which just helps in general with how your body's going to function on a daily basis. Branched chain amino acids are super critical for restoring muscle function and muscle protein synthesis after long strenuous days. We've got a whole host of different ionic trace minerals, which is really good for you as well. So in a sense, it's actually more effective and more loaded than a lot of, multivitamins are out there. So truly if any one product was to stick with people, especially in the workforce, Hydrate and Recover would be the simple answer to that one.
And for the workforce athletes listening, and maybe they're just finishing a shift or driving home or driving to the next job, if they remember 3 things from this conversation about fueling and sustained performance, what would those be?
I think the name of the game is try not to let the perfect ruin the good. And I think a lot of people make that mistake a lot. I do too. Just try to make better decisions with the available options you have at every chance you get. If you're going to a Burger King, if that's the only option you can possibly have, order it without the bun. Skip the bread and the carbs. That's not going to do anything for you necessarily. So it's always just trying to make today a little bit better than yesterday, those decisions a little bit better today than yesterday. And in general, just be intentional with what you're putting in your system, because it directly correlates to the way you feel, not just physically, but mentally, and how you carry through the rest of your day, not just your work day, but how you go home to your wife and kids, what kind of attitude, what kind of mood, what kind of energy you go home with, which is, at the core of it, obviously we want to put in a good, healthy, safe day at work, but we want to show up at home the best people we can be as well. So that it all comes down to food too. I know that's a long one. The second one I would say is hydrate. Hydrate often, hydrate well. Water is king, but make sure you're getting good electrolytes in the mix there too. That is a pretty important step in staying adequately hydrated is keeping electrolytes in your system, so your brain, your body, your muscles have the right signaling cofactors there to make sure they're carrying out their function. It's going to help your decision making, your reaction time. It's going to help everything. You're just going to feel like a better human being at the end of the day. Number 3, I'd say don't look at things from 5 feet off the ground. Try to really take a step back. When I feel like crap at work, I tend to think, what did I just do? What did I just eat? A lot of times it starts the night before. So when you have a really big day the next day at work, that kind of starts the night before. And that doesn't mean like, oh, the job starts now, but focus on getting a good night's rest. Eat a good meal. Maybe don't have 4 beers, have maybe 1 beer, or don't drink at all. Just make sure you go to bed well hydrated, well nourished, set yourself up for a good night's sleep. that carries into who shows up for work the next day, and will much greater impact that than the decisions you make that day. It tends to be that the decisions you make the night before or the day prior are really what really drives how you feel the next day.
Well, Kevin, this has been an awesome conversation. Any final thoughts that you'd like to leave our guests with?
Really, I guess just the main one is that like wilderness athlete, working athlete, we're one and the same. And like I kind of hit on earlier, that wilderness athlete is the fun side. We're the nutrition product for the guy that gets to go hunting on the weekend or spends a week in the mountains with his family. Working athlete is the thing that pays the bills for our whole world. It's what pays your bills. It's the job. And so we know that the stakes are much higher for people in the field. And we take that very, very seriously. Our products are incredible on both sides of that, so they are the same products, frankly, but we want to be, cognizant of that. So if there's ever anything that somebody sees on wilderness athlete that they think, hey, this might be great at work, let us know. We'd love to help people out. But we just respect a hell of a lot of what the men and women are doing in the field. And it's highly, highly important. And so we take great responsibility in making sure that the products we make are of the highest quality that we can possibly deliver to those people, so they feel the very best that they can, both at work and, on the weekends when they're playing in the mountains.
Most people treat nutrition as something separate from work, something that you deal with before or after the shift. But for the people doing physically and mentally demanding work, nutrition is part of the job. It drives your energy, your focus, your ability to make good decisions, and your capacity to recover and come back ready. We invest in our equipment, we maintain our tools, we show up with our gear dialed in. The body that operates all of that deserves the same standard. Kevin, what you've shown us through your work in the backcountry and with Wilderness Athlete is that performance is not just about effort, it's about how well you fuel the system behind it. And that principle applies just as much on the job as it does at 10,000 feet with a heavy backpack on. So thanks so much for bringing that here. Kevin, how can people learn more about you and Wilderness Athlete?
Well, I would say the best way to learn about anything we have going on at Wilderness Athlete is subscribe to our newsletter. So you can go to wildernessathlete.com. We've got a great newsletter that goes out. We don't send you spammy stuff. It's either really just helpful insights into the healthy lifestyle or, maybe a sale here and there. We've got a great Instagram. It's at wilderness_athlete. Mine personally is at wild athlete. So just singular there, but we're incredibly open. Like our customer service, our reach out to us. It's really what we thrive on, is talking with people. We love to help people. We love to communicate with people and maybe help people troubleshoot what the right combination of supplements could be to help them with something they've got going on. We thrive on that. We're all just people, trying to be healthy and better today than we were yesterday. So we learn from our customers a ton. So don't ever be shy. If there's a question you have or input at all, anything, reach out to us. We've got a great customer service line, or send me a message. My personal email is kevin@wildernessathlete.com. So any feedback, questions, or ideas you have, we're looking forward to hearing them. So please don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome. We'll make sure to put that in the show notes. And just a reminder to follow and subscribe to the WorkReady Podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. It just helps ensure that you get access to the latest episodes like this. And if this changed how you think about fueling your body, make sure to share it with someone on your crew, with your safety leader, your operational leader, so that you have access to the best information about how you guys can stay strong on the job. And until next time, take care of yourself, take care of your people, and stay work ready. Thanks so much.